Professor Tilmora's forearms moved through the holographic display with practiced grace, each hand gesturing to different parts of the massive creature that floated above the lecture hall. The students sat in their specialized seats, each designed for their particular biology. Crystalline shardlings refracted light from their corners, while the gaseous whispers occupied containment spheres that hummed softly. The insectoid clickkin chittered among themselves until the professor's sharp look silenced them. Danny Reed sat near the back, his human frame looking almost comically simple compared to his classmates. He'd been the only human at Galactic Academy for 3 months now, and he still wasn't used to being the odd one out. Back on Earth, he'd been normal. Here, he was the weird predator species that everyone whispered about when they thought he couldn't hear. The dread wolves of Korath Prime, Professor Tilmora announced, her voice carrying easily through the amphitheater, represent one of the most feared predators in recorded history. Note the 6 eyes arranged to provide complete spherical vision, the crystalline fangs capable of crushing battle armor, the armored scales along the spine and flanks. The hologram rotated slowly. Danny leaned forward despite himself. The creature looked massive, easily the size of an Earth grizzly bear, but its proportions reminded him of something else, something familiar. The way it stood, the shape of its head, even the tail held a certain way. It looked like a wolf, like the pictures he'd seen of dire wolves from Earth's Ice Age, but bigger and more terrifying. These creatures, the professor continued, drove 3 separate civilizations to complete extinction before mysteriously vanishing themselves approximately 800 years ago. Their pack intelligence rivaled that of modern cetacean descendants. They hunted in coordinated groups using tactics that suggested advanced reasoning and planning. A shardling in the front row flickered nervously. "Professor, why did they go extinct?" "Were they hunted?" Tilmora's expression became difficult to read, which Danny had learned meant she was uncomfortable. "The records are unclear. The dominant theory suggests environmental collapse on Korath Prime. Others propose disease. The truth has been lost to time." Danny almost raised his hand to point out the wolf similarities, but stopped himself. Humans already made the other species nervous. The last thing he needed was to draw comparisons between himself and extinction-level predators. He'd learned that lesson in his first week when he'd smiled with teeth showing and caused a small panic. The lecture continued with more details about hunting patterns and social structures. Danny took notes on his tablet, trying to focus, but something felt off. The environmental controls in the lecture hall seemed to be fluctuating. The temperature dropped slightly, then rose again. The lights flickered so briefly he almost thought he'd imagined it. Then he felt it. The distinct sensation of being watched. Danny glanced around the lecture hall. All the other students faced forward, absorbed in the presentation. Professor Tilmora hadn't noticed anything unusual, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, an old human instinct that his species had carried from the savannah. In the corner of the room, near the supply closet, the air seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from pavement, except the room wasn't hot. Danny blinked hard, wondering if he needed to adjust his station's atmosphere mixture. Sometimes the oxygen levels weren't quite calibrated for human needs. The shimmer intensified. Reality seemed to ripple like a stone dropped in still water. And then, with no sound at all, something appeared. It took Danny's brain a full second to process what he was seeing. The creature from the hologram, the extinct dreadwolf, stood beside his desk. Not a projection. Not a recording. A physical breathing animal that was currently staring directly at him with all 6 of its eyes. Time seemed to slow down. Danny could see every detail. The silver-gray scales that covered its body, each one slightly different from the next. The way its chest rose and fell with breath. The intelligence in those eyes, bright and alert and focused entirely on him. The dreadwolf sat down beside his desk, exactly like a dog waiting for a treat. Its tail, thick and scaled, moved in what might have been a wag. Then someone screamed. The spell broke. Suddenly everyone in the lecture hall was moving at once. Shardlings shattered into their component crystals in panic, reforming near the exits. The whispers compressed into tight, terrified balls. Click-kin scattered in all directions, their legs clicking frantically against the floor. Professor Tilmora's forearms waved wildly as she tried to activate emergency protocols. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights pulsed in warning. Automated voices announced in multiple languages that there was a biological hazard in Lecture Hall 7, and all students should evacuate immediately. Through it all, the Dreadwolf didn't move. It sat beside Danny's desk, completely calm, as if materializing in a panic-stricken classroom was perfectly normal behavior. Danny found himself standing, though he didn't remember getting to his feet. His hand had moved instinctively toward the creature, though he'd stopped it halfway. Every logical part of his brain screamed that this was dangerous, that this was a predator that had destroyed civilizations, that he should run like everyone else. But the creature wasn't acting aggressive. It was just sitting there looking at him with what he could only describe as expectation, like it had been waiting for him specifically. Security personnel burst through the doors, weapons drawn and charged. They wore full combat armor and their weapons hummed with barely contained energy. But they stopped short when they saw the Dreadwolf positioned between them and Danny. The creature didn't growl or attack. It simply stood up, placing itself directly in their line of fire, shielding Danny with its massive body. Still not aggressive, just protective. "That's impossible," Professor Tilmora whispered from near the door, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. All four of her hands trembled. "They've been extinct for 800 years. Danny looked down at the Dreadwolf. It looked back up at him. And despite everything, despite the alarm and the weapons and the impossibility of it all, Danny felt something he hadn't felt since arriving at the academy. He felt like he'd found a friend, I think. Danny said slowly, his voice somehow steady. "It likes me." The standoff lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Security personnel formed a semicircle around Danny and the Dreadwolf, their weapons trained but not firing. Nobody wanted to be the one who accidentally hit the human student while trying to take down an extinct predator. Danny kept his hand raised in what he hoped was a calming gesture. The Dreadwolf remained positioned between him and the security team, but its posture wasn't aggressive. Its 6 eyes tracked each guard's movements, but its tail still had that slight wag to it. "Everyone just stay calm," Danny said, his voice steadier than he felt. The creature's head tilted slightly at his words, as if listening. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." One of the security guards, a large being covered in chitinous plates, shifted his weapon slightly. Immediately, the Dreadwolf's lips pulled back, revealing those crystalline fangs. Not a snarl exactly, more like a warning. The guard froze. "Lower your weapons," came a new voice from the doorway. Dr. Rath entered the lecture hall, moving on his 6 legs with careful precision. The head of xenobiology was known for being methodical and calm, even in crisis situations. Slowly. No sudden movements. The security team obeyed, though they looked unhappy about it. Dr. Rath approached carefully, keeping his movements smooth and predictable. The Dreadwolf watched him but didn't react aggressively. "Fascinating," Dr. Rath murmured, his multiple eyes examining the creature from different angles. "Student Reed, I need you to try something." Walked toward the door, slowly. Danny swallowed hard and took a step. The Dreadwolf immediately moved with him, staying at his side like a shadow. When Danny stopped, it stopped. When he took another step, it matched his pace perfectly. "It's bonded to you," Dr. Rath said, wonder creeping into his usually clinical tone. "Or at least it thinks it has." Remarkable. The next several hours were a blur of activity. The academy went into partial lockdown while scientists, security personnel, and administrators tried to figure out what to do. They couldn't sedate the Dreadwolf without risking Danny's safety. They couldn't separate them without the creature becoming agitated. And they certainly couldn't just let an extinct predator roam the station freely. Danny found himself in a hastily prepared containment room, which was really just a large cargo bay with the boxes moved out. The Dreadwolf stayed glued to his side, only relaxing when Danny sat down on a bench someone had brought in. The moment he sat, the creature lay down beside him, resting its massive head on its paws. Without thinking, Danny reached out and touched the creature's head. The scales were smoother than they looked, cool to the touch but not cold. The Dreadwolf's eyes closed partially, a rumbling sound emerging from its chest that might have been a purr. "You're not so scary, are you?" Danny whispered. "Just lost and confused." The creature made a small sound, almost like agreement. Dr. Rath appeared with a portable scanner and several assistants. "We've completed the preliminary analysis," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "The creature is genuine. Carbon dating confirms organic material approximately 800 years old, plus or minus a few decades. DNA analysis matches archived samples of dreadwolves from Korath Prime. But how? Danny asked. How is it here? That, Dr. Rath admitted, we don't know. Station sensors show no transporter activity, no hull breaches, no unexplained energy signatures. It simply appeared as if it materialized from nothing. He paused, studying Danny carefully. Do you have any idea why it might have chosen you? Danny shook his head. I was just sitting there taking notes. Then I felt weird, like someone was watching me, and then it appeared. Felt weird how? Like the air was shimmering. The temperature changed. It's hard to describe. Dr. Rath made notes on his tablet, his multiple legs shifting as he thought. We've identified it as female specimen classification that matches historical records as Wolf 7. If the archives are correct, she was part of the last known pack. She needs a name, Danny said suddenly. We can't just call her Specimen 7. It's a dangerous predator from a dead world, not a pet. She's a living being who's scared and alone. Danny met Dr. Rath's multiple eyes steadily. And she hasn't hurt anyone. She's been calm this entire time. The Dreadwolf, as if understanding she was being discussed, lifted her head and looked at Dr. Rath. The scientist took an involuntary step backward. I'll name her Ash, Danny decided. Her coloring reminds me of ash from a fire. Over the next day, the Academy administration held multiple emergency meetings. Danny, stuck in the cargo bay with Ash, could only imagine what was being said. Professor Tilmora visited once, bringing food that Ash refused to touch. The synthesized nutrients apparently weren't to her liking. They want to sedate her, Tilmora told Danny quietly. Send her to a containment facility for study. Some are arguing for termination, saying she's too dangerous to keep alive. She hasn't done anything wrong, Danny protested. She exists. For many species, dreadwolves are monsters from nightmare stories, symbols of death and destruction. Tilmora's 4 hands twisted together nervously. I'm trying to argue for alternative solutions, but I'm just one voice. That night, Danny couldn't sleep. He lay on the cot they'd brought him, staring at the ceiling while Ash slept nearby. Every time he shifted, her eyes would open, checking on him before closing again. He thought about Earth, about the dogs humans had domesticated over thousands of years, about how wolves had once been feared predators before becoming humanity's best friends, about trust and companionship and the bonds that formed between different species. Danny sat up, an idea forming. Ash, he said softly. The dreadwolf's head lifted immediately. I need to prove you're not dangerous, that you can be trusted. Will you help me? She stood and walked over to him, pressing her massive head against his chest. The gesture was unmistakable. Trust, loyalty, partnership. The next morning, Danny requested a meeting with the Academy Council. They agreed, probably out of curiosity more than anything else. The council chamber was designed to accommodate multiple species, with specialized seating and atmospheric controls. Danny stood in the center with Ash at his side, facing 7 council members who represented different aspects of Academy governance. I want to take responsibility for her, Danny announced before they could speak. I'll prove she's not a threat. Give me a chance to show that she can coexist peacefully. Council member Prism, a shardling who'd made no secret of his distrust of humans, flickered with agitation. Absolutely not. The creature is a historical menace. It should be contained or destroyed. She's intelligent and peaceful, Danny argued. She's had dozens of chances to hurt people and hasn't. She responds to communication and shows emotional awareness. For now, Prism countered. What happens when her predatory instincts activate? When she decides to hunt? Then I'll take full responsibility. But I don't think that's going to happen. Danny took a breath. I think she's just lonely. I think she's been alone for 800 years somehow, and she's looking for connection. The council members debated among themselves in multiple languages. Finally, Dr. Rath spoke up. I propose a trial period. Student Reed takes responsibility for the creature under supervised conditions. We monitor her behavior, document everything. If she shows any signs of aggression or instability, we revert to containment protocols. The vote was close, but it passed. Danny had 1 week to prove Ash wasn't a danger. As they left the council chamber, a small whisper drifted over to them. Its containment sphere was decorated with patterns that reminded Danny of graffiti. That was brave, the whisper said, its voice synthesized through speakers on the sphere. I'm Drift. I study impossible things, and your friend there is definitely impossible. If you need help figuring out where she came from, I'm interested." Danny smiled. "I could use all the help I can get." That night, Danny was awakened by a low growl from Ash. She stood facing his closet, every muscle tense. Confused, Danny got up and opened the closet door. His jacket hung there, the same one he'd worn to class the day Ash appeared. Something fell out of the pocket. A small device made of metal he didn't recognize, covered in symbols he couldn't read. It was humming softly, glowing with faint light. Around Ash's neck, Danny noticed for the first time, was a collar. Etched into it were the same symbols as on the device. "Where did you come from?" Danny whispered, holding the device carefully. "And what is this thing?" Ash pressed against him, whining softly. Whatever the device was, it was important, and somehow it was connected to her impossible appearance. Drift's living space looked like a storm had hit a library. The whisper existed inside a modified containment sphere that allowed for greater movement, and every surface around it was covered in displays, tablets, and projection equipment. Danny had to pick his way carefully through the clutter, while Ash simply stepped over everything with surprising grace for such a large creature. "Let me see it again," Drift said, its gaseous form swirling with what Danny had learned was excitement. The whisper had been analyzing the device for 3 days now, cross-referencing symbols and running every test imaginable. Danny handed over the small metal object. It had stopped glowing after that first night, but it still hummed faintly if you held it close enough. The symbols etched into its surface matched perfectly with those on Ash's collar, which they'd examined carefully without removing it. "Okay, so I've been going through the Academy archives," Drift explained, projecting holographic images around the room. "These symbols are definitely from Korath Prime, but they're older than the Empire period. Way older. They're from before the civilization became focused on order and control." "How much before?" Danny asked, settling onto a cushion while Ash lay beside him. "At least 1,000 years. Back when Korithian culture was more diverse, more artistic." Drift pulled up images of ancient murals and carvings. "See these? They show Korithians living alongside dreadwolves, not hunting them, not fearing them, living with them as partners." Danny studied the images. In one, a Korithian child rode on the back of a dreadwolf. In another, wolves and Korithians worked together to build structures. The scenes looked peaceful, cooperative, nothing like the monster stories Professor Tilmora had described. But the historical records say the wolves were predators that destroyed civilizations, Danny said. "The historical records might be wrong." Drift spun in its sphere, or incomplete, or deliberately changed. "I found gaps in the data, places where information should be but isn't. And when I try to access certain files, I get blocked. Even senior researchers can't access them." That was disturbing. Danny stroked Ash's head absently, thinking. "What about the device itself? What does it do?" "That's where it gets really interesting." Drift projected a complex schematic. "It's a temporal beacon. Extremely advanced technology, way beyond what even the Korithian Empire achieved according to records. It's designed to create a bridge through time, pulling something forward from a specific moment in the past." Danny's eyes widened. "You're saying this thing pulled Ash through time?" "I'm saying it's designed to do exactly that. Whether you activated it or it activated itself, I don't know. But somehow, 800 years ago, someone put Ash into temporal stasis and sent her forward to when this beacon would activate." Drift paused. "The question is why? Why save her specifically? Why send her to this exact moment? And why did the beacon end up with you?" Before Danny could answer, his communication device chimed. It was Professor Tilmora, asking him to come to her office immediately. She sounded worried. The professor's office was cluttered with specimens and books, a comfortable chaos that reminded Danny of Drift's space. Tilmora sat at her desk, all four hands busy with different tasks, but she stopped when Danny and Ash entered. "I've been doing research," she said without preamble, "into the extinction of the dreadwolves. The official records are sparse, but I found some personal journals from that era, archived in the historical database." She pulled up a display showing handwritten text in Korithian script, translated into common language. "This is from a rebel fighter named Korin. He was part of a resistance movement against the Korithian Empire. Listen to this entry." Tilmora read aloud. "They're hunting all the bonded pairs now. It started with the wolves and their companions, but it's spreading. Anyone who shows loyalty to something beyond the state is considered dangerous. They say emotions make us weak, that bonds create chaos. But I've seen what their order brings: cold efficiency, isolation, a galaxy of individuals who trust no one and care for nothing beyond themselves. Danny felt a chill run down his spine. The Empire hunted the dread wolves deliberately? According to these journals, yes. The wolves bonded with specific individuals, usually people the Empire considered troublesome. Artists, free thinkers, those who questioned authority. The Empire saw the bonds as threats to their control. Tilmora looked at Ash sadly. The official records say the wolves went extinct naturally. But these journals tell a different story. They were systematically eliminated. What happened to the last pack? Danny asked quietly. The journals become fragmentary near the end. There are references to a final stand, to rebels using experimental technology to save what they could, and then nothing. The rebels were defeated. The Empire claimed total victory, and the wolves passed into legend as monsters rather than companions. Ash made a low sound, almost like mourning. Danny wrapped his arm around her neck, feeling the weight of centuries of loss. Over the next few days, Danny, Drift, and Professor Tilmora worked together to piece together the puzzle. The more they learned, the more disturbing the picture became. The Corithian Empire hadn't just fallen like the records claimed. There were no records of how it ended, only that it did. No documentation of collapse. No records of what came after. It's like someone erased the ending of the story, Drift observed during one late-night research session. Danny was about to respond when Ash suddenly stood up, all 6 eyes fixed on the door. A moment later, someone knocked. Dr. Rath entered looking agitated. "We have visitors," he said. "An unscheduled ship just docked. They're claiming to be from the Galactic Heritage Preservation Society." "I've never heard of them," Tilmora said. "Neither had I until an hour ago, but they have proper credentials, legal authority, and they're demanding to see the Dreadwolf." Dr. Rath's multiple eyes focused on Danny. "They want to take her to a preservation facility." Something in Danny's gut twisted. Ash pressed against his leg, trembling slightly. She'd never shown fear before, not even when security had surrounded her with weapons, but now she was afraid. "I want to meet them," Danny said. The delegation consisted of 3 beings in environmental suits that obscured their features completely. Their leader introduced itself as Surveyor Finn, though whether that was a name or a title wasn't clear. They spoke in a calm, measured tone that somehow felt colder than any insult. "The creature is a valuable piece of galactic history," Finn explained, standing in the conference room while Ash refused to enter, staying in the hallway with Danny. "It belongs in a proper facility where it can be preserved and studied." "She's not an object," Danny said. "She's alive. She has feelings, preferences, awareness. Precisely the problem." Finn's suit turned to face Danny directly. "Creatures like this are unstable, emotional. They form inappropriate attachments that lead to unpredictable behavior. For everyone's safety, it must be properly contained. She hasn't hurt anyone. She's been peaceful and cooperative, for now. But predators are patient. They wait for the right moment to strike." Finn produced a data tablet. "We have full legal authority to remove historical specimens that pose potential threats. The Academy Council has 48 hours to comply voluntarily, or will obtain a judicial order." Danny felt Ash's fear through their connection, though he didn't fully understand how. "What kind of preservation facility are you talking about?" "A secure location where the creature can live out its remaining days without endangering civilized species. Alone, naturally. Bonding behavior must be discouraged?" "You mean isolated? In a cage?" "In safety." Finn's tone didn't change. "Emotions are dangerous, human. They cloud judgment, create instability, lead to chaos. Surely your species understands this, given your own troubled history." The delegation left shortly after, but their presence lingered like a bad smell. Dr. Rath looked troubled. Tilmora looked angry, and Danny felt something he couldn't quite name. A sense that something was very wrong with this entire situation. That night, Ash woke Danny by pressing her head against his chest. Her 6 eyes stared into his, and suddenly his mind filled with images that weren't his own memories. He saw through Ash's eyes, saw a world of color and beauty. Korath Prime before its destruction, saw herself running with a pack, playing with Corithian children, sleeping beside a bonded companion who scratched behind her ears exactly the way Danny did. Then the images darkened, soldiers coming, separating bonded pairs, fear and pain and loss, being forced into some kind of chamber while her companion screamed her name. Light and energy and the sensation of falling through time itself. And finally, darkness, waiting, alone in a void between moments, until suddenly she could move again, could breathe again, could see again. And there was Danny, the first person she'd seen in 800 years who felt right, who felt like home. Danny gasped as the connection broke. Tears ran down his face without permission. "They took you from your family," he whispered. "The rebels saved you, but you've been trapped this whole time." Ash whined softly, licking his face. "I won't let them take you again," Danny promised. "I won't let them put you in a cage." Whatever it takes, he didn't know how he'd keep that promise. But looking into Ash's 6 eyes, seeing the trust there despite everything she'd lost, he knew he'd find a way or die trying. The maintenance shuttle wasn't designed for comfort, but it was small and fast, and most importantly, it wasn't being monitored by station security. Danny had never stolen anything in his life before today. The fact that he was stealing a spacecraft while harboring an extinct predator and violating about 15 different Academy regulations would have been funny if he weren't so terrified. "Are you sure about this?" Drift asked from its portable containment sphere, which was mag-locked to the co-pilot seat. "No," Danny admitted, running through the pre-flight checklist with shaking hands. "But Finn's people are coming back tomorrow with legal orders. Once they have Ash, we'll never see her again." Professor Tilmora had helped them escape, though she'd made them promise not to tell her where they were going. Plausible deniability, she'd called it. She'd provided coordinates to a place called Reach, a fringe colony far from official oversight. She'd also given Danny a tight hug and whispered, "I lost my bonded companion to a preservation society 20 years ago. I never questioned it. I should have." Ash sat in the cargo area, her scales clattering slightly against the metal floor as the shuttle's engines warmed up. Danny could feel her anxiety through their strange connection, mixing with his own fear to create a feedback loop of nervous energy. Launching in 3, 2, 1, Danny counted down, then activated the thrusters. The shuttle lurched away from the Academy station. Alarms immediately started blaring behind them, but they were already accelerating. Danny had studied the flight paths during his transport certification classes. He knew the gaps in sensor coverage, the blind spots where a small shuttle could slip through. "They're hailing us," Drift reported. "Security wants us to return immediately." "Ignore them." Danny's hands were steadier now that they were committed. "How long until we can jump to hyperspace?" 2 minutes. "But Danny, there are ships moving to intercept." Through the viewport, Danny could see larger vessels changing course, trying to cut off their escape. His heart hammered, but he kept the shuttle on course, weaving between docking platforms and cargo containers. 30 seconds to jump range, Drift announced. A warning light flashed. Someone had locked weapons onto them, not to destroy probably, but to disable their engines. Danny made a split-second decision and yanked the controls hard to port, diving under a massive cargo hauler. The weapons lock broke as they disappeared into the larger ship's sensor shadow. "Jumping now," Danny said, and activated the hyperdrive. Space stretched and blurred around them. The stars became lines of light, and then they were traveling faster than light itself, leaving the Academy far behind. Reach turned out to be exactly as advertised. A barely regulated mess of a colony built into a large asteroid. Ships of every size and description cluttered the docking approaches. The local traffic control was handled by what sounded like a bored teenager who barely asked any questions before assigning them a landing pad. The colony itself was a maze of tunnels and chambers carved into the asteroid. Different sections had different atmospheric mixes and gravity settings, creating a chaotic blend of environments. Danny had to carry Drift's sphere while Ash walked beside him, drawing stares from the diverse crowd of colonists and traders. Professor Tilmora's coordinates led them to a salvage shop run by a weathered human named Hal. He looked like he'd been in space for decades, with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and scars that suggested a violent past. "You're the kid with the extinct predator," Hal said without preamble. "Tilmora sent word you were coming." He studied Ash with a practiced eye. "Heard stories about dread wolves when I was doing exploration work in the outer sectors. Thought they were myths. Can you help us?" Danny asked. Hal was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I can help. Because I've seen what these preservation societies do and it ain't pretty. He locked the shop door. Come on. I've got a back room where you can stay while we figure things out. Over the next few days, Danny learned that Reach was home to more than just traders and smugglers. There were others like him. People on the run with companions that official society deemed inappropriate or dangerous. A shardling named Crystal lived with a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. According to records, the species had gone extinct 50 years ago. A clickkin called Chitin shared his quarters with something that resembled a large, intelligent fungus. Also supposedly extinct. There's a pattern, Drift observed during a gathering in Hal's back room. The group had started meeting regularly, sharing information. Every species that forms deep emotional bonds gets classified as extinct or dangerous. Then preservation societies step in to remove them. It's not just animals, Crystal added, her faceted body refracting the dim light. I've heard of entire cultures being declared extinct, their survivors relocated to preservation facilities. Always the ones that value family bonds, emotional connections, artistic expression. Hal leaned back in his chair. I've been tracking this for years. The preservation societies, the efficiency councils, the order bureaus. Different names, same goal. They want a galaxy of isolated individuals who follow rules and don't ask questions. But why? Danny asked. Control. People who love something beyond themselves are harder to control. They'll fight for what they care about. Resist orders that threaten their bonds. Hal's expression hardened. I was military once. Saw good soldiers refuse immoral orders because they had families waiting for them. The brass hated that. Wanted obedient tools instead of thinking beings. Danny thought about the journals Professor Tilmora had found, about the Carithian Empire and its hatred of emotional bonds. It's not just one organization, is it? It's something bigger. Much bigger, Crystal confirmed. And they've been doing it for a long time. While the group talked strategy, Hal pulled Danny aside. If you're going to protect her properly, you need to know how to fight. Can't just rely on her to defend you. The training was brutal. Hal had Danny running obstacle courses through Reach's maintenance tunnels, practicing hand-to-hand combat, learning to shoot weapons Danny had never imagined existed. Ash participated too, revealing abilities Danny hadn't known she possessed. She could shift her coloring slightly, blending into backgrounds like a chameleon. When Danny got injured during training, accidentally cutting his hand on sharp metal, Ash pressed her head against the wound and he felt warmth spreading through his body. The cut healed faster than should be possible. The bond works both ways, Hal explained. She gives you strength, you give her purpose. That's why they fear it so much. Drift, meanwhile, had been working on the temporal beacon. The Whisper had modified it, enhanced it, turned it into something more than just a one-way device. It's not just a beacon, Drift announced excitedly. It's a key, and I think I know what it unlocks. The Whisper projected a star map. When activated fully, it points to a specific location. The Korath system. But that system is gone, Danny said. The star went supernova 200 years ago. The star, yes. But supernovas leave remnants. Neutron stars, planetary fragments. What if something survived? What if the rebels hid something there before the end? It was a long shot, but it was also their only lead. They needed evidence, proof of what the preservation societies were really doing. Without it, they'd spend their lives running. It's dangerous, Hal warned. The radiation in that system will fry most ships. And if the preservation people are tracking the beacon, they'll follow you there. Then we'll need to be ready for them, Danny said. Word spread quietly through Reach's underground network. People who'd lost companions to preservation societies. Families torn apart by efficiency mandates. Rebels who remembered when the galaxy had been more than sterile order. When Danny's small ship prepared to launch for the Korath system, he found he wasn't alone. Dozens of ships joined the formation, piloted by beings from across the galaxy who'd all suffered the same losses. Crystal was there in a modified fighter. Chitin piloted a transport filled with supplies. Even some humans from Earth, recent arrivals who understood the value of bonds between species. Hal clapped Danny on the shoulder before boarding his own ship. You started something, kid. Whether you meant to or not. People are tired of being told what they can and can't love. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Ash pressed against Danny's side. Through their bond, he felt her determination mixing with his own. Let's go find out what they're so afraid of, Danny said. The jump to hyperspace felt different this time. Not an escape, but a mission. Behind them, they left Reach and its temporary safety. Ahead waited the ruins of a dead civilization, and the truth about why entire species had been erased from history. Danny looked at the gathered ships on his scanner display. 43 vessels, each carrying someone who'd been told their bonds were wrong, dangerous, forbidden, each one willing to risk everything to prove that love and loyalty were worth fighting for. Ash's tail wagged slightly as she watched the stars blur into lines of light. For the first time since finding her, Danny felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The Korath system looked like a graveyard. Shattered planets tumbled through space, their fragments caught in the gravity well of a rapidly spinning neutron star. Radiation levels were high enough that several ships in their small fleet had to hang back, their shielding insufficient for the hostile environment. Danny's shuttle, upgraded by Hal with military-grade protection, pushed forward with a core group of vessels. Ash stood in the cargo area, all 6 eyes fixed on the view screen as if she recognized this place despite its destruction. "The beacon is pulling harder," Drift reported. The whispers formed, swirling rapidly inside its sphere. "It's pointing to the largest planetary fragment, the one that used to be Korath Prime's main continent." Through the viewport, Danny could see the fragment in question. It was enormous, easily the size of Earth's moon, tumbling slowly through the debris field. Against all odds, structures were visible on its surface, preserved against the vacuum of space. How are those buildings still standing? Danny wondered aloud. Stasis fields. Hal's voice crackled over the communication system from his ship. "The same technology that saved your friend. Looks like the rebels protected what they could before the end." Landing on the fragment was tricky. The gravity was weak and inconsistent, and radiation warnings kept flashing on every console. But Danny managed to set the shuttle down in what had once been a plaza, surrounded by buildings frozen in time. The landing party consisted of Danny, Ash, Drift, Hal, Crystal, and a few others brave or desperate enough to risk the radiation. They wore protective suits, though Ash refused any covering, her scales apparently providing natural protection. The city was eerily preserved. Danny could see where people had been walking when the stasis fields activated. Vehicles stopped mid-flight, water frozen in fountains, even birds suspended in the air. It was like looking at a photograph of a moment caught forever. "This way," Drift urged, following the beacon's signal. They moved through streets that had once been full of life. The architecture was beautiful, all flowing curves and artistic flourishes. Nothing like the cold efficiency of modern galactic buildings. These structures had been built by people who cared about beauty, not just function. Ash led them to a large building at the city's center. The door was sealed, but the beacon pulsed when Danny held it near the lock. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life and the door slid open. Inside was an archive, walls lined with data storage devices and physical books. Everything was preserved perfectly by the stasis field. In the center of the main chamber stood a massive computer terminal, still glowing with power after 800 years. "Incredible," Crystal whispered, her faceted body reflecting the terminal's light. "It's all still active." Drift interfaced with the system, the whisper's gaseous form flowing through the computer's access ports. "It's an archive of everything. History, culture, art, scientific records, the entire civilization's memory, preserved for whoever would find it." The terminal activated a holographic display. Images filled the air around them, showing Korath Prime as it had been. A vibrant world where Korithians and Dreadwolves lived together, not as masters and pets, but as partners. Children grew up with wolf companions. Artists worked alongside them. Scientists collaborated with the wolves' natural intelligence. "This is nothing like what the records say," Danny said, watching scenes of cooperation and joy. "Because the records lied," a new voice said. Danny spun around. Standing in the archive's entrance was Surveyor Finn, flanked by a dozen armed figures in matching suits. Their weapons were drawn and pointed at the landing party. "How did you find us?" Hal demanded, his hand moving toward his own weapon. "The same way you found this place. The beacon signal is quite distinctive." Finn walked further into the archive, showing no concern for the weapons Hal and the others had drawn. "Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring for it?" "You've been hunting these beacons," Danny realized. "That's why you wanted Ash, not for preservation. To find this place and others like it." The rebels scattered their evidence across the galaxy. hoping someone would find it and expose the truth. Finn's tone remained maddeningly calm. We've been cleaning up their mess for 8 centuries. The truth about what you did, Crystal said, her voice sharp. About how you erased entire cultures. Finn tilted its head slightly. We brought order to chaos. Before the Reformation, the galaxy was a mess of emotional species, forming bonds that led to conflict, inefficiency, suffering. We created a better system. By destroying anyone who felt love or loyalty, Danny's anger surprised him with its intensity. By eliminating weaknesses, emotions cloud judgment. Bonds create divided loyalties. A properly ordered society requires individuals who follow logic, not feelings. Finn gestured around the archive. This civilization proved our point. They valued emotions over efficiency, bonds over order. And where are they now? Extinct. Destroyed by their own weakness, Ash growled. A deep rumbling sound that made Finn's guard step back nervously. Danny felt her rage through their bond, ancient and fierce. This being represented everything that had destroyed her world. You destroyed them, Danny said quietly. Didn't you? The supernova wasn't natural. The details are irrelevant. What matters is that we've spent 800 years building a better galaxy. Stable, peaceful, orderly. Finn's suit turned toward Danny directly. And we're not going to let one human child and his pet undo that work. She's not a pet. No, she's a weapon. One you don't understand how to use. The Dread Wolves were designed as biological weapons by the rebels, created to bond with their soldiers and enhance their abilities. That's why we eliminated them. That's a lie, Drift said, the whispers formed turning an angry red. The archive shows they evolved naturally, formed bonds organically over thousands of years. Does it matter? Truth is what people believe, and people believe what we tell them. Finn made a gesture and the guards advanced. Now you'll come with us quietly or we'll take you by force. Your choice. Danny looked at Ash. Through their bond, he felt her strength, her loyalty, her absolute refusal to surrender. He thought about all the people who'd joined them, all the lost companions, all the bonds that had been broken by the preservation societies. I choose neither, Danny said. Ash moved like lightning despite her size. She placed herself between Danny and the guards, and suddenly her scales seemed to shimmer with energy. The bond between them intensified, and Danny felt power flowing through him that wasn't entirely his own. Crystal shattered into her component crystals and reformed around several guards, disorienting them. Chiton's fungus companion released spores that clouded the air. Hal opened fire with his weapon, forcing Finn's people to take cover. In the chaos, Drift accessed the archive's broadcast systems. I'm uploading everything to the network, the whisper announced. Every ship in our fleet is receiving the data and preparing to transmit it across the galaxy. Stop them, Finn ordered, no longer sounding calm. But it was too late. The truth about Korath Prime, about the Dread Wolves, about 800 years of deliberate cultural erasure, was already spreading through the communication networks. Ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying the data to every corner of known space. Danny felt something building inside him, inside Ash, inside the very air around them. The beacon in his hand began to glow brighter, resonating with something in the archive. What's happening? He shouted over the noise of the firefight. The beacon was never just for finding this place, Drift called back. It's activating something. Multiple somethings. Across the galaxy. On the holographic display, star maps lit up. Dozens of locations, each one marking another hidden archive. Another preserved colony. Another piece of evidence the rebels had hidden before their fall. And at each location, temporal stasis fields were deactivating. Species thought extinct were returning. Cultures erased from history were waking up. The rebels' final gift, preserved for 800 years, was finally being delivered. Finn stood motionless, watching their carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. You've doomed the galaxy to chaos, the surveyor said. Emotions will tear civilization apart. No, Danny said, his hand on Ash's head, feeling the bond between them burning bright and true. We've given it back something you took away, the right to choose connection over isolation. Through the archive's sensors, they could see more ships arriving, not Preservation Society vessels, but ordinary people who'd heard the broadcast, people who'd lost loved ones to the societies, people who'd been told their feelings were wrong, people who were tired of being told how to live. Finn's guards lowered their weapons, Even they could see the tide had turned. "This isn't over," Finn warned. "Order will be restored." "Maybe," Hal said, his weapon still trained on the surveyor. "But it won't be your order." The Preservation Society forces retreated, outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Finn's ship departed the system, leaving behind the archive and its truth. Danny stood in the ancient building, surrounded by evidence of a civilization that had valued love and loyalty above efficiency and order. Ash pressed against him, her warmth solid and real. "We did it," Drift said, sounding amazed. "The data is everywhere now. They can't suppress it." "They'll try," Crystal warned. "This isn't over." "No," Danny agreed, watching more ships arrive in the system, drawn by the beacon's signal and the promise of truth. "But it's a start." 6 months had changed everything and nothing. Danny stood in the same lecture hall where this whole journey had begun, but now the room looked completely different. Where before there had been only standard academy seating, now there were accommodations for bonded pairs. A shardling sat with their light jellyfish companion. A clickkin shared a desk with their fungus partner. Even a few humans from Earth had arrived with their dogs, cats and other animals, and beside Danny's desk, as always, lay Ash. Her 6 eyes tracked the students entering the hall, but she was relaxed, content. She'd grown slightly in the months since appearing, her scales shinier, her movements more confident. The collar around her neck had been analyzed and studied, but nobody had tried to remove it. It was part of her history, a reminder of where she'd come from. Professor Tilmora stood at the front of the hall, all 4 of her hands organizing materials for today's lecture. She looked happier than Danny had ever seen her. Next to her, in a special containment unit, floated a small creature that looked like a cross between a butterfly and a cloud. Her bonded companion returned from a preservation facility after the truth had come out. "Good morning, everyone," Tilmora began, her voice warm. "Today we continue our corrected history curriculum. We're going to discuss the real story of the Dreadwolves and the civilization of Korath Prime." The holographic display activated, showing images from the archive they'd discovered. Not monsters, but companions. Not predators hunting civilizations, but partners helping them thrive. Danny half listened to the lecture. He'd lived this history, knew it better than most. Instead, he watched the other students, seeing how they reacted to the truth. Some were skeptical, raised on the old lies. Others were curious, especially those who'd formed their own bond since the revelations. The galaxy hadn't transformed overnight. The Preservation Societies still existed, though now they faced scrutiny and resistance. Governments and institutions were slowly, reluctantly acknowledging the truth. Some embraced it, establishing new policies that protected bonded pairs. Others fought against it, clinging to the old order. But change was happening. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. After class, Danny walked through the academy station with Ash at his side. Students no longer scattered when they approached. Instead, many waved or stopped to pet Ash, who tolerated the attention with patient dignity. Drift met them in the common area, the Whisper sphere decorated with new patterns. The small alien had become something of a celebrity, their research into temporal technology and lost civilizations earning recognition from institutions across the galaxy. "Got the latest numbers," Drift announced excitedly. 43 species previously thought extinct have been recovered from stasis. Over 200 cultures erased from official records are being rediscovered. And bonded pairs are forming at rates not seen in centuries. The preservation societies aren't happy about that, Danny noted. "No, they're not. But they're losing influence. Hard to maintain authority when everyone knows you've been lying for 800 years. Drift spun in its sphere. "Oh, and you got another invitation. The Council of Free Worlds wants you to speak at their assembly." Danny groaned. He'd given dozens of speeches in the past months, testifying before governments, speaking at universities, telling his story over and over. He wasn't a natural public speaker, preferred action to words, but Ash pressed against him, and through their bond he felt her encouragement. She knew this was important, that words could be weapons as powerful as claws and teeth. "I'll do it," Danny agreed. Hal found them later in the recreation area. The old soldier had been busy since the revelations, working with reformed preservation personnel to rescue more bonded pairs and recover hidden archives. He looked tired but satisfied. "Got something to show you," Hal said, leading them to a docking bay. Inside was a ship, sleek and fast, built to the latest specifications. On its hull was painted a symbol, a dreadwolf and a human standing side by side. "She's yours," Hal announced. "Gift from some grateful people who got their companions back. Figured you'd need proper transportation for all that ambassador work you're doing." Danny was speechless. He'd been flying Academy shuttles and borrowed transports for months. This was a real ship, his ship. "We named her already," Crystal added, appearing from inside the vessel. The Unity. Seemed appropriate. That evening, Danny attended a gathering in Professor Tilmora's quarters. What had started as a small support group for people with bonded companions had grown into something larger. Representatives from dozens of species crowded the space, sharing stories and strategies. The Efficiency Council tried to pass new regulations, a Shardling reported. Wanted to require licensing for all bonded pairs, but the proposal was defeated in public vote. 3 more preservation facilities have been converted to rescue centers, Chaitin added. They're actively helping reunite separated pairs now. Not all the news was good. There had been violence, backlash from those who preferred the old order. Some Preservation Society members had gone underground, continuing their work in secret, and there were species who genuinely feared the return of bonding, worried it would lead to the chaos Finn had predicted. But slowly, the tide was turning. "We're winning," Crystal said, her facets gleaming with hope. "Not everywhere, not all at once. But we're winning." A week later, Danny stood before the Council of Free Worlds, a coalition of governments that had embraced the truth about bonding. Ash sat beside him on the platform, her presence a living reminder of what they were fighting for. 6 months ago, Danny began, his voice carrying through the vast assembly hall. "I was just a student trying to understand a galaxy that seemed alien and cold. Then Ash appeared and everything changed. He talked about the journey, the discoveries, the truths they'd uncovered. He talked about bonds not as weaknesses but as strengths, connections that gave meaning to existence. The preservation societies told us that emotions make us vulnerable, that caring for others makes us weak. But I've learned something different. I've learned that bonds make us stronger. They give us something to fight for, something to live for. They make us more than isolated individuals. They make us family." Through his speech, Ash remained calm and dignified, proof that the feared predators of legend were capable of love and loyalty. When Danny finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young Corithian approached Danny nervously. The species had been nearly extinct, scattered across the galaxy in hiding, but they were returning now, reclaiming their history. "My grandmother remembered the wolves," the young Corithian said. "She was a child when they disappeared. She used to tell me stories, but I thought they were just fairy tales. Thank you for proving they were real." Danny felt Ash's pride through their bond. This was why they'd fought, why they'd risked everything. Not just for themselves, but for all the others who'd lost their companions, their cultures, their histories. Time passed. The Academy established new programs studying interspecies bonding. Drift led research teams investigating the lost technologies of Korath Prime. Hal trained security forces to protect bonded pairs from remaining Preservation Society holdouts. Crystal worked with governments to establish legal protections for all forms of companionship. And Danny taught. Alongside Professor Tilmora, he educated new generations about the truth of bonding, about the beauty of emotional connections, about the strength found in loyalty and love. One day, a student raised their hand during class. "But Professor Reed, what if the preservation societies were partly right? What if bonds do make us vulnerable?" Danny looked at Ash, remembering everything they'd been through together. The fear, the danger, the moments when he'd thought they might not survive. But also the joy, the trust, the absolute certainty that he'd never been alone. "Yes," Danny admitted. "Bonds make us vulnerable. When you care about someone, you can be hurt through them. You worry about their safety. You feel their pain. It's easier to be alone, to not care about anyone but yourself." He paused, scratching behind Ash's ears. "But that's not living. That's just existing. Bonds give us purpose, meaning, connection. They make us part of something larger than ourselves. And yes, that comes with vulnerability. But it also comes with strength we could never have alone." Ash's tail wagged slightly, and through their bond, Danny felt her agreement. After class, Danny and Ash walked to their favorite spot on the station, an observation deck with a view of the stars. Other bonded pairs were there too, a mixing of species and companions that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "We did it, girl," Danny said quietly. "We changed things." Ash pressed against him, and he felt her contentment, but also her awareness that the work wasn't finished. There were still Preservation Society members in hiding, still cultures being suppressed, still bonds being broken. But for the first time in 800 years, there was hope. Real, tangible hope that the galaxy could be more than cold efficiency and isolated individuals. Danny's communication device chimed. Another invitation, another speech, another chance to spread the truth. He accepted it, knowing Ash would be beside him every step of the way. In the observation deck's reflection, Danny could see himself and Ash side by side, a human and a dreadwolf, species from different worlds and different times brought together by technology and fate, and a bond that had survived 8 centuries of suppression. They were proof that connection was stronger than isolation, that love was more powerful than fear, that bonds couldn't be erased no matter how hard anyone tried, and together they were changing the galaxy, one heart at a time. Ash looked up at Danny with all 6 eyes, and he knew what she was thinking without words. They'd choose love every single time, no matter the cost, and they'd never be alone again.